Live. You see it there?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Hello. Welcome to day 5, our parent strategy session. We may have some people joining in as we go here, but we're going to go ahead and just get started. Can you guys hear me okay today? Hopefully you can hear me okay. Give me thumbs up if sound's working. Very good. And are we live on Facebook?
I can hear you well.
Oh, very good. Okay.
And you were live on Facebook.
Let's see if we are live, streaming live. Want to make sure that anybody tuning in there can see us in Parenting with Personality group. So I'm going to double check that. It says here that we are live there. So yes, we are. Very good. Okay. Hello, everybody. Day 5, we're here for our parent strategy session, and I want to welcome you. This has been such a fun week. I just have loved getting to know you guys better, getting to hear about your families, getting to hear about your lives. I was wondering if you would like to start by sharing something that stood out to you from yesterday's session. So if you have something you want to share from yesterday, I would love to hear about it. Go ahead and unmute.
The emotional, I'm trying to remember what comment I made yesterday.
Yeah.
The emotional, with the ADHD kids and the emotional, like being emotionally younger.
Right.
Because our middle son, even though he's a 7th grader, he like still is around the 5th grade, 6th grade level of emotion, and just that's kind of where he's at. So he's always been younger, and we always thought it was just because he's a younger kid. I mean, his birthday's in June, so he had just turned 5 and started kindergarten. And we thought that was just kind of the problem. He was younger, but it's all kind of starting to make a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
That part of the issue.
Yeah, that's great. And I had mentioned to you when we did our phone call the other night, the iceberg with the ADHD, and I have that on one of my slides to show today, because I think that that's something that maybe a lot of people haven't seen before that was really eye-opening to me. And so I want to be able to share that with you guys today. Autumn, what about you? Did anything stand out to you yesterday or this week? Maybe you're able to unmute. If not, that's fine too. She might not be able to unmute. She might have to be camera off or sound off, so no worry. Okay, well, we are going to spend some time talking about how we use the family huddle and how we use the Calm Care plan, because for a lot of people, it can feel a little bit overwhelming as you're getting started, as you're trying to figure out how to make it work and how to apply it to your family. So we are going to share screen here. And we're going to start with what I just mentioned, the iceberg of the ADHD stuff. And I think this is really, really helpful. In fact, this was something I had even shared with some of the school teachers, because I think a lot of times we are dealing with people that have an idea of what ADHD might look like. Only for a lot of people, they think that it's just kind of the hyper, the unfocused, or maybe even a little less controlled or less mannered. And I think that that really does a disservice for how we need to understand ADHD. And what's so frustrating to me, and I've heard this from so many medical professionals, one of the first questions they ask when you're looking in to, does my child have ADHD? How do we know if it's ADD? What's going on? Can we explore this? The very first question they usually ask is, well, are they struggling in school? And I think that that does such a disservice to what this is really about, because it's not necessarily about struggling with grades. Even some very, very gifted kids who are ahead in their studies, who score high on the testing, can have ADHD. And I think it's so important, especially when thinking about ADHD in girls. Oftentimes they can compensate, But what we do notice more is the lack of emotional control. And so I think it's important that we look at all of the different aspects of ADHD and how it is more than what people have kind of painted it to look like, and why that's so important. Because if we're only thinking about it as hyperactive or maybe lacking control of manners, there's so much more that we can't help them learn. We can't teach the skills. We can't address appropriate accommodations or supports that we have in place. And so I think, if you look at this, it talks about the tip of the iceberg and the things that are maybe more obvious behaviors, the impulsivity, lack of control, difficulty waiting their turn. Maybe they blurt things out, interrupt people, talk back, loses their temper, maybe inattention, they're disorganized, they don't follow through, don't pay attention, maybe forgetful, maybe appear to not be listening, or they lose things, or their homework's late. And then, of course, the hyperactive, where they just can't sit still, constantly fidgeting, talking a lot, runs about, climbs about, always on the go. So those might be the things that are more obvious, but hidden beneath the surface are the not so obvious behaviors. And I think it's good how this printout here is from Attitude Magazine, and they have great resources, and that's where this came from. So I would encourage you to go to that website. They have tons of articles on ADHD, ADD, even other things well beyond that. And it has been a great source of resources. So that's where this came from. But it talks here about those hidden beneath the surface things, and how there's, issues with the neurotransmitter deficits and how that impacts their behavior because of the dopamine and norepinephrine, and, how it really is insufficient levels of these things in their brain. Physiologically, it's different. The weak executive functioning, we've talked about that a little bit this week, and that frontal lobe and how it's just not functioning with memory recall or getting started, that task initiation, or controlling their emotions, problem solving, figuring out how their behavior impacts other people. We talked a little bit this week about the impaired sense of time. Sleep disturbance, I think it says in here 56% of kids with ADHD struggle with sleep disturbances, and how that impacts their brain functioning. We talked about the 3-year delayed brain maturation, and I think that's important because it helps us realize, are we expecting things from them that they're actually capable of doing? And is the behavior we're seeing maybe appropriate, developmentally appropriate for where they are, but maybe not where someone who is the same age might be if their maturation level was different? And so I think it's important that we learn to factor all of that in. Additionally, here it talks about not learning easily from rewards and punishment. It's so hard for their brains to make that connection. And then it lists a whole bunch of things there, a little bit of what we've talked about this week, how what they do affects other people, how if they receive discipline for something in the past, does that mean that the consequence is going to be the same in the future? And it can mean a lot of retraining. It can mean a lot of retracing steps, a lot of repeating yourself, and then building in supports to help them remind themselves, what will the consequence be? And that's where the consistency can really come in. Do you need to practice things? Do you need to role play things? Rather than just thinking, okay, you didn't do it right, now there's a consequence. Maybe the training of that skill is more important than a consequence. And then coexisting conditions, anxiety, depression, for some bipolar, Tourette syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder, possibly even oppositional defiant disorder, or one that we've talked about this week that isn't even mentioned here, other mood disorders, whether they're unspecified or disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. And that's one that we're actually starting to hear a lot more about. In fact, there's a lot of support groups online that are for parents whose child has the DMDD, and that's just kind of a chronic irritability. It's things are never really good. There's just kind of always an issue. There's always a problem. And they usually have like 3 or more big meltdowns in a week. And they're usually more severe than what you would expect for their age or the situation, or in just how long they even last. And so, that's some different things that families can explore is, Are we working with any diagnoses? And if we are, how do we address those? And are they comorbid with something like ADD or ADHD? And figuring that out. And then seriously, for a lot of these kids, there's learning issues. And it may be a learning disability. It may be part of their memory. It may be part of forgetting, things that need to go from home to school and school to home. Those kind of things impact grades, which then impact their success in school. And so, figuring out how is their learning impacted? Is it learning? Is it socially? Is it writing? Is it math? Is it how they retrieve information? Is it their reading comprehension? Is it how they try to describe the things that are going on in their life, their communication skills? Is that their cognitive processing speed? Is it sensory issues that are impacting them socially and maybe in the classroom? Is it even handwriting or inattention? And obviously, impulsivity can really play in to how children are coping. And if they can stop behaviors, or if they just kind of forge ahead and then all of a sudden there's a big mess and we've got to help them figure out the big mess. So those are important things for us to remember that we may be dealing with that are a part of ADHD that people may not have realized before. And then, of course, last but not least, that low frustration tolerance and how they have that trouble controlling their emotions, and they can have a really short fuse and be very emotionally reactive. They can lose their temper easy, and they don't have a lot of tolerance for struggling through things. They may give up easy, or if they can't do it right, they just don't want to try at all, or those kind of things where the tolerance and persistence just aren't there. They don't like to stick with things. If it feels too hard, they give up, or if they don't think they can be successful or perfect at it, they may give up. But this is a really big issue for them, and difficulty seeing others' perspective. It's hard for them to shift their thinking. And so that may seem very self-centered, but that's what they understand best. They don't shift back and forth as easy to your perspective, my perspective, how this affects you, how this affects me. And you can imagine when you're dealing with a child that has some of these or many of these issues, how that can really complicate family relationships. And so I think it's important for us to realize it is more than hyperactive. It is more than not paying attention. There's so much to it. And how that plays out in family relationships, in school settings, when we're out and about with our child, you can see the challenges that would really raise and how it could really make their life feel pretty difficult. All right, next we were going to talk a little bit about the family huddle. And before we get into that, Mickey, you had posed a really good question about, let me see if I can phrase it the way you had it. You said it so well. You were basically asking, how do we get our other family members on the same page with understanding that child's needs? Is that accurate? Okay, so there's some different ways that we've done this in our home that might be helpful for you. One of those is to talk one-on-one with that child. You need to have a language that both of you can understand. And I really encourage you to try to keep that strength-based. You're talking through with that child. You know what? You have a really busy, complex, really, really high-wired brain. And your brain can do a lot of things all at once. Not every brain is like that. And so there's some things that we need to do to help you learn to manage your busy brain. And there's also times when your brain is so busy and your brain is so engaged that you might feel things really fast and really, really deep. And that can be a challenge, because sometimes when you think things or feel things really, really deep or really, really fast, they can be a little bit hard to control. And so sometimes it's kind of like, I heard this analogy once and I thought it was perfect because kids relate to it. It's like having a race car brain, but sometimes bicycle brakes. And bicycle brakes don't work very good on a race car. And race cars can do good things, but race cars aren't appropriate in every setting. And so it's important that we learn how to use your uniquely wired brain to do what it does best. And then helping your other kids understand, everybody in our family is wired differently. Some of us think fast, some of us think slow, some of us think things really deeply, others of us don't spend a lot of time thinking or feeling things. everybody in our family is different. And we had this conversation away from the other child so that we could be a little bit more honest about, questions that they had or how we might answer those better. And so then we took the other siblings aside and we said, we really need to understand that everybody's brains are different, and use what I just said. And we also need to understand, this sibling is wired a little bit different than you might be wired. And when they feel things, they feel it really, really fast. They feel it really, really deep. And so you might notice that they get really angry really fast. And so we need, as a family, to know that about them and work well with that. So I'm going to ask that you really work hard to understand how their brain is wired. And we're going to understand how your brain is wired. And you may not respond the same way, but we need to remember that when they start getting frustrated, we need to back off a little bit. If they've had a tough day, maybe we just figure out ways that we can show some grace, or that we can maybe make some compromises, or that we can work out things that really matter to them. And you know what? There might be times where I need you to be willing to just go with it, whatever it is that I ask you to do. And I want you to understand, like, if you're wanting the remote one night and it's been a really tough night and I ask you to share the remote, I need you to do that, but I'm going to make you this promise. When I see that you are working to bless other people in this family, I'm going to work really hard to bless you too. I want you to feel like I see you and I hear you and I understand what you need. And there's times where our families had to have this discussion because sometimes it can start to feel unfair to them. Like, well, why do I have to give in? Why do I need to do this? And just say to them, if it starts feeling unfair, or if you start feeling like maybe, we need to understand what you need better, would you just come and tell me that? And we're going to work really hard to do that. We're going to work really hard to make sure that we're seeing what you need and that we can help you see what they need as well. And have these conversations as a family. Some other things that we've had to talk about when maybe our kids kind of tend to poke at the one who gets upset a little faster, or maybe pushes them a little bit too far, isn't quite as willing to help out. We've had to talk about, sometimes people have a disability and they are in, say, a wheelchair. And if you saw somebody in a wheelchair, you would know right away, oh, they probably can't walk. And so you wouldn't ask that person to get up and walk. And you wouldn't get mad at them if they didn't walk. And you for sure wouldn't put them in a spot and give their wheelchair a push to where their wheelchair was just out of control, right? Well, we need to remember that brain wiring is similar. And just like people can have a disability on the outside, we may have something called like an invisible disability. And that might be where maybe their brain functions in a way where they need things to be a little bit slower. And so we might need to remember that just like you wouldn't give a wheelchair a push, you wouldn't give anybody a push with their emotions by causing them to get angry or stirring stuff up with them so that they would feel out of control. We need to use that same kind of care when it is somebody who has that emotional challenge. And so we need to be conscientious of that as a family. And that might be what that conversation would sound like if you have someone that just kind of goes after that child who erupts more easy, if they're hitting those buttons. And then again, this might be the kind of thing that you call a family huddle about after you've talked to both sides, and you talk about, do we need a keyword? Do we need a code word that when you've had a rough day, you can just say the word and your family knows you just need some extra grace? Is there a code word that just kind of says, I just need to be by myself right now? Is there something that you might need to say, just a shorthand word that says to your family, I've had a hard day. I don't want anybody poking at me. I just need you to understand. Maybe it's a color. Maybe, in our family, we started using thumb signals. Thumbs up meant everything was good. If thumb was to the side, it was kind of like, hey, we kind of need to be finding some strategies that can help me calm down. I'm not feeling so great and I don't even know what it is. Thumb down was like, I will likely erupt any minute, and you would usually try to intervene at this point so you didn't hit the thumbs down. So that just, those are different ways that your family can check in with each other. And it's not just the child who has the high emotion that can use the thumbs up signal. It can be anybody in the family. You might even say, hey guys, it's been this kind of day and I just need this kind of understanding and everybody to pitch in. And it's a great way for your family to start paying attention to, where are we all on the spectrum of good to bad day, and how can we care about each other no matter where we are? And if it's been a good day, let's celebrate with each other. Let's get along. Let's talk about it. If it's been a bad day, I can be a quiet support or I can listen. And I think those are things that we really need to be conscientious of and purposeful in training in those calm moments so that we can have that short phrases. When a child is getting worked up, they're not going to do well when we use a lot of words like, well, what is it you need right now? Can you tell me, was it a thumbs to the side day? Tell me. Okay, if it was thumbs to the side, they don't have the tolerance at that point. So we need to build the skill in a calm moment so that when things start escalating, we just call upon that skill with short form. I call it my meltdown shorthand. And that shorthand is so, so important. All right, does anybody have questions so far? I want you to feel like you can ask any questions as we go. Oh no, Autumn keeps freezing. Hopefully you can hear us now, Autumn. All right, any questions so far? Mickey, are you good?
Yeah, kind of.
Go ahead.
And you might have said this and I missed it, but like when you fill out the family, do you do one with your one child? Is that what you're saying? Like you do it with the one and then kind of do it with everybody, or is this kind of for them and then you just kind of fill in everybody else? I just want to make sure I got it in my brain.
If I were you, I would approach the conversation like, if you feel like you could do it without the paper, sit with the one child and kind of talk through these very things and get their perspective. Then if you can sit with the other siblings and talk about it with them, then come together as a family, because I think the child who tends to have the meltdowns will probably open up and share more honestly with you if you're talking one-to-one with them first. The other siblings may ask different questions, may share more of what they need when you're talking with them without the other child there. But then I think it's important that you come together and then you make that plan for the family huddle. And that's where I would encourage you to kind of, write this out. Not that you have to write it out every time, but I think until you get the steps of, okay, first we just need to see what is the issue or the situation or the concern. What are their thoughts, feelings, concerns, ideas? What are our thoughts, feelings, concerns, ideas? And then brainstorm how we work it out. Eventually, you don't even need to write it out. It'll just kind of become your second nature. You'll just know, okay, this is what we progress to next. But I would definitely encourage separate conversations and then together doing the huddle.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what I thought, but I was going to take in my notes.
No, that's good. Thanks for asking. Very good. And then, just even as you talk through things, if it's preparing for a holiday, if it's preparing for summer, if it's preparing for vacation, we would have these huddles before we would go on vacation and we would decide, okay, what is it that we're going to pack that we can use when we are in a restaurant? Waiting in a restaurant was never very good for us. It just, we needed to have some tools on hand. So would we take putty? Would we take a deck of cards? Would we take fidget spinners? What they have that little left, right, center game, what is it that we're going to have in our little home care kit that goes wherever we go, that's in the car or that we can take into a restaurant? What is it that we can do to help those moments where we feel struggle? And kind of just plan ahead. If getting up in the morning is an issue, maybe you have a family huddle about waking up and being on time for school. Maybe it's homework time. You might need to have a huddle over how are we going to do homework time? What are some issues that you guys think family huddles might be helpful in your families with?
I think, because I work in a really stressful job right now, so I think for me, I'll be a little selfish, like it'll help my kids with me. So, right, like if I come home and I'm having a rough day or Jason's had a rough day, like they know mom just needs a little extra help. It's a struggle with Jackson for like if there's any type of homework. Friday schools used to be detrimental to him. He felt like it was a punishment.
Right.
Kind of worked past that. But I think this will help some of the situations that I know he's struggling with, to kind of figure out how we can make it easier for him to handle them. Because he doesn't do change great. He just doesn't. And he has to prepare almost kind of like you're saying with your son, with his food and the tech, like Jackson has to prepare. Well, where are we going today? Well, why are we going there? Well, who's going to be there? Well, how long are you there? And if my husband and I are out, like if we go on a date or we are in town getting groceries, he will call a total about 5 times each of us individually. Where are you at? When are you going to be home? Well, how long are you going to be there? Well, will you call me before you turn down the dirt road? Like it's almost like if it's a safety net or he has to prepare himself for the next steps.
Yeah.
So I think this will help him on us explaining to him like, okay, we're going to go on a family trip or we're going to, and so hang tight, like.
Exactly. And even writing it out might be really helpful for him. Making things visual for kids that have the high sensitivity and the ADHD or ADD can be so helpful, because then when they see it, their brain takes it in differently. Jackson, what are your concerns? How about let's just have a quick family huddle, Jackson. We're headed out on a date tomorrow night. Let's figure out how we can make this work really well. What is it that you might need? Or do you have any concerns? What might you need when we're gone? Do you know what you would want to eat for dinner? Do you know about how long we would be gone? Does that matter? Do you know what activities you would do? Let's talk through what your night would look like. And then, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to go. We're going to plan to be gone about this long. What could we plan that would make tomorrow night feel kind of special to you? Or how can we make it feel easier for you? What things can you look forward to tomorrow night? And what we're doing is that we're prepping their brain to all of a sudden, it's not the unexpected, it's the expected, because we've talked through it. We've made the plan. We've prepared their brain. We've primed their brain so that it's already headed down a track instead of having to jump tracks, because they don't jump tracks well. And it was so helpful for me when I realized the unexpected was a trigger. And to me, unexpecteds seemed like big events. There are so many unexpecteds, even in the course of a school day. Like when our son hears about anything special that's going on at school, it's an unexpected. It doesn't feel special to him. It feels like, no, never mind. I don't want to go on that field trip. No, but you like the Rockies. I'm not going. I don't go on field trips. Right away, there's this resistance for, I don't know what it's going to look like, sound like, feel like, be like. There's too many unknowns, but they can't articulate that. So what you get is resistance. Nope, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, because they would rather not do it than try to do something that feels that hard. So that's a great example on a date night, night before. Just sit down and, you and Jackson have a huddle about it. Or if, there's going to be other kids at home, have a family huddle about it and figure out as much as you can that helps make that path for them even smoother. I know for us, we would have huddles over restaurants, and it would even include taking a picture of the menu and letting him look at it, finding it online and saying, okay, looks like this is what the menu is going to be. What do you think you'll order? And, it wasn't like he would right away be like, oh, yay, I'm ordering a hamburger. It would usually be a little bit of that reluctance even then. I don't know. I've never been there. I don't even know what they have. Okay, well, that's okay. I've never been there either. It's hard to go somewhere new and not know if you're going to like something. That's why it might help for us to look at this menu. I might even decide what I'm going to have. And then you spend a little bit of time looking, and then you start pointing things out. Oh, looks like they have hamburgers, cheeseburgers too. Oh, yep, kids meals for kids under 12. Oh, okay, so you usually get hamburgers. I wonder if you'll try a hamburger. I don't know. Let me see. Let me look at that, Mom. And before you know it, they're buying into the plan because you've been able to work through the resistance instead of putting them right in the middle of it. And so that might be really good for your date night things. Very good. All right. Autumn, did you have any questions before we move on to something different?
Yeah, I will, because it's just me. So I have to wear multiple hats, and
Yeah.
I have one that I have to kind of prepare for. Sorry, my kids are watching TV in the background. I have one I have to kind of prepare for, like the day's events. And then I have the other one who, if he hears the day's events, he hyper focuses on that. And that's all I will ever hear, like every few minutes up until that event happens, which could be later in the day. So it's so hard to like separate them.
Yeah. And you know what? You're right, because some children will overreact to the more they know. So that's an important key to know about your child. And if you have one of those children, there was a certain time where certain things our child couldn't know about ahead of time. And I thought, okay, we're going to go to the doctor. Maybe we should prepare for all of that. And I had to get to the point where I would just sit with him and I would say, okay, we have a doctor's appointment coming up. Do you want to talk through what it's going to be, or do you want to wait? And even just that much control of a situation can help them decide, yes, helping will help me know, or no, I'm going to choose to hear later. And so that might be an important huddle that you have with them each individually. The child who does need to know, you might, go off with them at the start of a day and say, hey, we've got some things planned today. Do you want to go over the plan, or are you good? Say to the other child, hey, sometimes you like to go over the plan of the day, sometimes you don't. What do you need today? And doing that individually rather than assuming that every child needs that information. If the unexpected is not a trigger for them, you don't need to do that. It might be that overwhelm is a trigger. And so if you're dealing with overwhelm being the trigger, that might be why talking about too much of it sets the other child off.
Yeah, I have noticed I do catch myself lately, like when I'm trying to share something that's coming up, I'm like, I stop. I'm like, never mind. I'll just let it go until it happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm more aware of myself too, not to like tell them.
Yeah. It's hard to, especially when you have a number of children to work around to be like, okay, you need this, but you need this. So, even just that little bit of one-on-one time each day allows us that time to be like, okay, where are you at? What is it that you need? How can I help you today? How can I make your day easier? Whatever that question might be. And it can make such a difference to how that train gets on the track.
Yeah. And that's hard because I have, well, I don't really get one-on-one time with them because it's just me, and I have to have supervision on all of them, especially the boys. So that's hard.
That is hard. And you know what? Even I hear that from a lot of parents who have a lot of children, because it feels like, man, there's just not enough of me to go around. I want to encourage you to make the most of the first 3 minutes of that child's day and the last 3 minutes of that child's day. If you can focus on those 6 minutes, those are really key moments. And even if it means putting them to bed, staggered to where you tuck them in individually and you get that 3 minutes, even that much can make a big difference to them, because you are juggling a lot. It's hard to find those moments.
I'll try that. Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes we just, and instead of, just thinking, man, I need to have 30 minutes with each kid or 15 minutes for each kid, even just focusing on those 3 and 3 can be encouraging when you're already feeling a little bit weary. All right, let's move into talking about the Calm Care Plan. And did either of you have questions about kind of how to structure this with your family? And if there's anybody watching on Facebook, feel free to ask your questions there. I'm going to try to check there real quick just to make sure that we're answering questions, since I promised that's what today was going to be for. Okay, I do see a couple comments here. Let me see. Let's see. What about a child that just shuts down when you ask her about her feelings? She just says she doesn't know and really doesn't like discussing feelings at all. You know what? That can be really hard. And I think we touched on that just a bit with the overwhelm. And I think what is really important is that we look for those windows of opportunity when they're calm and they're not feeling any kind of anxious or worry. And it'll probably come in one-on-one time where you might even just be playing or doing something else together, coloring, building, going for a walk. And you just venture into these discussions to find out some of those little things that help. Hey, you know what? Sometimes you come home from school and you seem overwhelmed. What would make your evening feel easier? You know, a question like that is sometimes going to get us further than saying, well, why are you so grumpy? Or what's wrong with you? Or, man, you must have had a bad day. You know, noticing something or wondering something and then having that open-ended question. One of the best questions you can ask is, what's going on? Or what's up? Because then they get to fill in the blank with whatever comes. And it feels a little less threatening than talking about feelings. And they may start with giving you some facts and details. Well, I had a horrible day at recess. My friends, and before you know it, you're into, man, I bet that made you feel really sad. I would feel sad if that happened too. And so you can move right into the validating and the feelings without it feeling like that threatening discussion, because a lot of kids do struggle with how do they even talk about a feeling without being sucked into the feeling. And so, you know, doing something while you're talking, building, coloring, going for a walk, maybe you're playing at the park, swinging, doing something while you talk with these kiddos is going to be really helpful. It kind of lets down that defensiveness and helps them connect at a different level. Hopefully that kind of helps, Rachel. If anybody else has questions, I have my Facebook thing right here, so feel free to ask your questions there, and I will try to keep glancing back to that. I think it's really a challenge when you're dealing with a child who is highly sensitive or highly emotional. Just the talk about feelings can cause them to almost feel the overwhelm and the lack of control that they really, really dislike. And so I think it's good that we venture into these conversations and then we see how we show them, we model for them that we pull back, and then maybe we have a little bit of fun. And then we can talk about something hard, but we don't have to feel it, and then we can shift. And we model for them what that shift looks like, because that's the shift that they have trouble making. That's the shift that is hard for them because they feel things so fast. They feel things so deep. And so modeling that for them is really important. And when they're open to it, even role playing can be really helpful. Hey, I know we said that you were going to talk to your teacher about your homework. You know, let's just practice real quick. What is it that you're going to say to them? Well, I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm going to say. Okay, well, do you want to pretend that you're the teacher and I'll pretend to be you? You might say something like this. I have a problem with my homework. I sat down and I did half of it last night, but I didn't get the other half done. You know, you would say what they might be able to say. Why? Because you're trying to make the unfamiliar familiar. And then you may say to them, does that sound like something you could try? Well, no, that's too many words. Okay, well, then let's try again. You know, ask them, does that fit? Doesn't fit. Do you want to try it? You probably know better words than I would. Why don't you give it a shot this time? And sometimes when we have a fail, they come back with something better. So don't be afraid to try and miss. That sometimes engages them in making that correction, in saying to you, no, I wouldn't say it like that. I would sound weird if I said it like that. I can't tell you how many times we venture into role playing and my kids will look at me and be like, that might be what a counselor would say. That's not what I would say. And I'm like, great, then you go ahead and tell me what you're going to say. And you're right into the role play. So don't be afraid to you know, take a shot at it. You might even use this opportunity. And Rachel, I don't know if your little one ever connects with humor, but humor is so important to breaking down some of that defensiveness. And so you might even approach conversations with feelings with a little bit of funny. You might approach it with a little bit of humor that kind of says, if you could make sadness a silly looking monster, what would it look like? Well, what would make that silly monster go? You know, engage them in ways where if they're creative, be creative. If they're factual, be factual. Did you know that there are a lot of kids that struggle with feeling scared? You're not the only kid that feels scared. And I want you to know, when I was little, I felt scared. It might be storytelling. There are so many ways that you can venture into talking about feelings. It might be a book. It might be, I don't know if you've seen the Spot books. It's like the Angry Spot, the anxious spot, the worry spot. Those might be some really good springboards to talking about feelings. But humor, fun, thinking, what is their personality? What does their personality engage with? Is it the fun? Is it making it short and simple, and this needs to be like bullet point conversation? Is it deep and meaningful? Is it relaxed and don't make this feel deep because that's how I shut down? Think about their personality and try to fit it into what works best for their emotional needs. And that's one of the reasons I think figuring out your child's personality is so key. All right, checking here, seeing if we have any other questions. That was a great question, Rachel. Thank you. All right. I had told Rachel that we were going to talk about mealtime in with the family huddle. And so before we get into the calm care plan, I want us to back up just a bit about the family huddle and how we use that about mealtime, because mealtime is one of the hardest sensory times for children. It engages so many of their sensory systems, ones that you might not even known existed. In fact, there's one called interoception. Sorry, my voice is kind of crazy today. I think it's wearing out just a little bit. Interoception relates to how kids feel and how they know what they feel. And I'm not talking about feelings, but it's like, am I hungry? Am I not hungry? Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I tired? Am I not tired? And their body honestly doesn't have a very good judgment of those things. It might be things like, is my mouth too full, or do I hardly have any food? Is my food well chewed? Is my food not well chewed? Some of you probably have kiddos that sit at the table and chew, 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 and you think, oh my gosh, swallow already. Probably related to sensory. And so when you think about it, it's not just the sight of food, it's not just the smell of food, it's not just the taste of food, it is even what the food is doing in their mouth that they struggle with. You know, feeling of swallowing or gagging. Some of them are extra sensitive. So eating can be a real challenge, and they stick with what they know because it can be expected. Anything new falls under the unexpected. So there's a couple things that I encourage parents to do. If mealtime is a challenge for you, you might try some different ideas. Bouncing on a big old exercise ball or jumping on a mini tramp prior to mealtime can kind of help. It's almost like a brain reset, that it just kind of preps or primes their brain to function a little bit better at mealtime. And our occupational therapist had shared that with me, and it did help our child's receptivity at mealtime to kind of accept things a little bit better. Another thing that was really important for him is bringing him into the kitchen before it was time to sit down and eat. Let him see the food. You might even ask him to stir the soup, or you might talk about what you're having, or you might explain what it is that you put in it, but making them familiar with what it is. And then we honestly had to change some of our thinking about mealtime, because 6 of our other kids were able to just sit down and you just eat what you're served and you just clean your plate and you're just done. It wasn't like that with him. He was really, really selective about what he would eat. He was selective about if it was different than the last time we made it. I mentioned the different meatballs, how that was even a problem. If he knew if it was spicy or not spicy, too hot or not too hot, all of those things caused problems. So we really had to become more flexible in what we expected of him, because with all of his sensory issues, we couldn't expect him to do something that his brain couldn't do. And that was be super flexible. So we had to adjust a little bit on our side. And we just got to the point where we know he doesn't like his food to touch on his plate. He does not like casseroles where everything is all combined. It doesn't matter that it's going to end up in the same place. You can say that until you're blue in the face. It matters to him. He doesn't want his food touching. So when we serve something that is going to be a casserole, say like tater tot casserole, we will separate his meat and his tater tots, or we will pull his meat out ahead of time. And as we did a huddle with him, we were able to come to some plan about, okay, you know, how many bites can you try of a food that you aren't sure of? Can you try 2 bites? Now, with many foods, he can do the 2 bites, And then he can have something more favorable, something that is easier for his senses. If he can't do 2 bites, you might not be able to push the 2 bites. You might have to adjust with where are they at that day? How hard has that day been on them? And is it reasonable to expect that on this day? We also had to come up with, okay, if we're having something that you do 2 bites of, but you can't do more, I need to know you can still have some good protein. Like your brain needs protein. So that was in my concern column. In his concern column was, I can't eat foods that are just too hard for me. So we made the plan that we had 5 things that were acceptable proteins. It might be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It might be a microwave egg. It might be a leftover hamburger because we have hamburgers or cheeseburgers or some sort of meat that we have, any kind of leftover meat, or he could make an egg, or he can have, what was the first thing I said? I can't remember what the first item, oh, peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a grilled cheese sandwich. Those were all things that if he couldn't do more than 2 bites, he would agree to choose one of those 5 things. And then he was able to help get that ready if we were having something he couldn't do. So he could fix his own microwave egg, or he could help make his sandwich. And that helped him learn the difference between, I'm not being picky, I'm not expecting you to provide me something different, but I'm willing to problem solve to get what it is that I might need. And you can also kind of use that as like a little bit of a litmus test. If they're willing to help you make a sandwich, it probably is a bigger issue than you may have realized. If they don't want to help with it, it may not be that big a deal, and they may decide, yeah, I think I'm just going to go ahead and eat it instead of making a sandwich. So it is kind of what helps you discern what might be necessary. And those were just a couple of the ideas that we used with mealtime. Okay, I'm checking Facebook if anybody has other questions there. Hopefully that is helpful, Rachel. Okay, we're going to move quickly over the Calm Care Plan. Does anybody have questions about how to make your family's Calm Care Plan? And we can also answer questions about this on Monday too. I want you to remember that Monday we have our coffee with a coach, and you can bring all of your parenting questions. You have the weekend to catch up and watch any videos that you missed. You can go over any of the homework assignments. And if you have questions on any of the homework assignments, on any of the videos, on any of the tools and strategies, on parenting issues in general, or the Calm Connection program, bring those Monday. We're just going to kind of have a chat. We're going to visit. I'm going to answer some more questions for you there. I know sometimes people say, well, what about this situation? Or what about when it comes to homework? Or we want to be able to just visit and talk like we would if we were sitting down having coffee. So I cleared some time on Monday morning at 10 o'clock for us to do just that. I also want to remind you that if you go back and do the action posts, action post 1, action post 2, action post 3 on day 1, day 2, day 3 videos, you can get entries for book drawings. We are doing a book drawing on Monday. And one of those books is this book here by Jenny Dean Schmidt, who does Channel Mom. And about every 6 weeks, I'm on that radio program as the counselor for moms. And she has written this book and agreed to let us use one of these for our book drawing, as well as some other books. And you won't want to miss this. On Monday in our Coffee with a Coach, I am sharing with you some of my favorite parenting books, a lot of which we refer to in the Calm Connection program. And I know you probably don't feel like you have time to sit down and read a lot of books. So that's another reason that the Calm Connection program can help you, because it kind of pulls some of the best together where you don't need to sit and read 10 parenting books. So that will be on Monday. If anybody has questions, bring them on Monday. Enter the drawing. Okay, questions about the Calm Care Plan? Anybody? I'm checking Facebook.
I guess my question kind of similar back to the huddle.
Okay.
Do you recommend like sitting down as a family and doing it with the one child first and then bringing the other ones in later? Like, because I have a couple children that I would probably need to do that individually with. Kind of what is your best approach of approaching starting a plan for the first time when you don't know what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely one-on-one.
Okay.
I would definitely do it one-on-one, and I would definitely do it with the child who needs it most first. Because I think that kind of gives you that lens to put on to where their receptivity is and where their minefield might be. You know, if you know, one of ours just really, really struggled with riding in the car. So every time we would go to my parents for a holiday, the long 2.5-hour drive just was too much for him. So we would have to sit down ahead of time and huddle with him what the car ride could include. What snacks were we going to take? What drink were we going to take? What movie could we take? So if I already knew that the child who needed it most needed these things, I could be a part of bringing that up if we did it as a whole family. Now, if the whole family isn't affected by the car rides, you may just choose to do a one-on-one huddle, and that's okay too. There's other times where, you know, if it's family vacation or it's our evenings or it's our mornings before school where it affects the whole family, then huddle with everybody. But I would encourage you, until you feel a little bit better about doing it, that you try a couple one-on-ones and think, okay, you know, where was the strong point? Where was the weak point? Why did this maybe flop the first time through it? What can I do different? I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. There are going to be things that you huddle just one-to-one. And that's okay. So I would start there.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? Okay, well, I am super excited to see you guys again on Monday. That will be our very last time to meet. If you haven't watched all the videos from this week, they will be up through the weekend. So feel free to watch them, catch up on them, maybe even do a couple of those assignments. And as I mentioned yesterday, the Calm Connection parenting program is now open. I think we already have one family in it, and I'm super excited. I hope that you will consider if this might be something that would be a help and a support for your family. We're going to be talking about some really great things. We're going to be talking about how to have the school in on what it is that you're doing, how to help the extended family and friends understand what your child's needs are. We're going to talk about advocating with doctors and professionals and counselors and teachers and all of that. There's so much that we cover, and I'm super, super excited about it. If you have questions about it, and if it might be something that would work for your family, feel free to jump on a call and we can just visit about it. Just you and I, we can spend some time talking about what your next step might be. Maybe you've listened this week and you've learned some different tools and strategies, but you're not quite sure where to go next. Let's just talk on the phone and let's see if maybe we can direct you to some different resources. Whether you're working with me or not, I want to make sure that you're leaving this workshop with your next step in mind and that you feel like you have helpful resources and support in place. Because parenting is a big job. It's an important job. And if the only thing you take from this week is that God gave you your child for a special purpose, and your child you for a special purpose, that in itself should fuel you for a long time, because God will equip you for that very special selection of you and your child. And I just want to encourage you in that. If you would continue interacting in the Parenting and Personality group, that will be great, because I love connecting with you there. Through the next week, I will be posting some certain things there, answering questions, interacting with you. So don't forget to check. There will probably be 4 or 5 posts a day. Just scroll through them, and some different poll questions, some different, I think we might even have a giveaway there. So be sure to check the Parenting with Personality group. Otherwise, I'll see you on Monday. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.